Yo, welcome back to the MMA Fight Realm. Thanks for tuning in. If you are new, it is your boy Chris, and I'm back with another picks and predictions video. This time for UFC Denver, Rose Namajunas taking on Tracy Cortez in the main event. Hope you guys like, comment, subscribe. Let me know what you guys think of these picks in the comments, and let me know your picks in the comments as well. Let's break it down, man. Leading off the card, we got Josh Fremd taking on Andre Petroski. Now, this one is a wild card, honestly. You don't know what you're going to get out of these two. Fremd, he can grapple for 3 rounds with one of the most pressuring grapplers like Anthony Hernandez, but then he can gas out and get guillotined against Tresean Gore. So, and then Petroski, a hard-fought decision win over Wellington Turman, and another hard-fought decision win over GM3. But then he goes on and gets finished against Michel Pereira and Jacob Malkoun in the first round. And the one against Jacob Malkoun is the one, obviously, that stands out the most because he got finished shooting for a takedown and just, I guess, landed his temple on Malkoun's hip. He knocked himself out, and I don't think Petroski will have a slight advantage in the grappling, in my opinion, because Fremd, I think he's game on the ground, and Fremd, he just really doesn't stand out anywhere in fighting overall. He can strike, he can wrestle, he can grapple, but he doesn't stand out in one particular area. And he's got an overall decent game in the striking. I kind of give him the advantage in this matchup against Petroski because Petroski, his shots are powerful, but they're very telegraphed. They're looping, they're wide hooks, and Fremd has the ability to even work some takedowns of his own if Petroski is throwing wild. I can see a world where Petroski gasses out in this fight because it's at elevation, and Fremd also trains in Denver at Team Elevation, so I think he's been preparing for this one much better than Petroski has. You got to question really just the downtrend of Petroski going on right now, and although Fremd doesn't have one particular area where he is the best or where he stands out, I think he can get it done here against Andre Petroski, man. If we see the version of Josh Fremd that didn't gas out against Anthony Hernandez in all those grappling exchanges, we can see him, like I said, having that cardio advantage, Petroski gassing out, and Fremd having to work his way to a finish here in the later rounds of this fight. So I'm going to be picking Josh Fremd to get this one done. I think he has the advantages in the striking if he can keep this one on the feet. And in the grappling exchanges, I don't see Petroski having that much of an advantage. So I'm going with Josh Fremd here to get this one done. Next up, we got Montel Jackson taking on Damon Blackshear. Extremely good fight. It's going to be a fun one to watch because from the tape I have seen of these two, I've had a really hard time making a pick, man. Montel with a wrestling background, but he has shown us that he can be lethal with his hands. He's huge for the weight class, and he maintains distance very well. 9 knockdowns in his last 5 fights, 10 if you just add the fight before that. There's no doubt this guy is well-rounded. He hasn't shown much jiu-jitsu besides when he clubbed and subbed Brian Kelleher back in 2018. But his takedown defense, it has let him down in the past, against guys like Ricky Simone and Brett Johns, both of which were able to, get a win over Montel Jackson. Those happen to be his only 2 losses in the UFC. Ricky Simone took him down 7 times. Brett Johns took him down 8 times. That, it doesn't look good on paper. And, watching Montel's fights back, you can see that JP Buys was able to get this dude's back and wrap him up into a rear naked choke. and Brett Johns had his back. Felipe Colares was able to get his back. These are fight ending positions for a guy like Damon Blackshear, who, you know, Damon, he's very skilled on the ground. 9 out of his 14 wins total are by submission. He's the most recent guy to join the list of now 3 in twister finishes in the UFC. When this guy has your back, you're in danger. All right. And on the feet, he's yet to ever be finished or knocked down in the UFC. This is for sure one of the better strikers he has faced in terms of finishing power. And Montel also has never been finished or knocked down in the UFC. Man, I gotta give the striking advantage to Montel and the grappling advantage to Damon. And for the pick, I have to side with Damon Blackshear here, man. I think it's an extremely close fight, and it's on short notice. You can argue that Montel might have the longer camp since he was supposed to face, I believe, Said Nurmagomedov, and then it was Farid Basharat before that. But man, extremely close fight. And Damon, he's no stranger to short notice fights, but he has a tendency to drop the 3rd round on these short notice fights that he's been in. This fight is at elevation, and that concerns me, but I think Damon can get to his grappling, and if he's in any of those positions that Montel has given up to his former opponents, I can see him getting a submission finish here. So Damon by submission or decision is going to be the pick for me. Next up, we got Mariya Agapova taking on Luana Santos. Long layoff for Agapova, almost 2 years. And I really got to question if it's for the right reasons. She's been having, you know, a lot of issues outside of fighting during this training camp. And if you look into her Instagram and all the articles and whatnot, I'm sure you'll see what I'm talking about, but I'm really not going to dive deep into that. When she was active, she was a savage. You know, her striking, stick and move southpaw, that is always giving problems to her opponents on the feet. She's a former boxing champion in Kazakhstan. Her stand-up is lethal, but her ground game is just awful. It's shit, man. When she's getting taken down, her focus is not on defending. It's more about trying to land damage, and it has costed her literally every time. You know, she's taken down and TKO finish against Shauna Dobson. She just had no answer on the ground for Shauna Dobson. And then, you know, Marina Moroz wrapped her into an arm triangle in the 2nd round. Jillian Robertson put her to sleep in the 2nd round as well. Against all 3 opponents I just mentioned, she had the striking advantage, and it didn't even matter. We got the same result. She got finished on the ground. There's no doubt Luana Santos is going to try to get this fight to the ground. You know, judo specialist with 3 submission wins. She was able to work 2 takedowns and 7 minutes of control time against the bigger opponent, Stephanie Egger, on short notice, and a judo specialist herself. Luana, she got the decision win there, and that was up a weight class on short notice. Luana now with 2 wins, you know, but Juliana Miller and Stephanie Egger aren't anywhere on the same level as Agapova in the striking and aggression, overall aggression. The question for me though is does Agapova make some of the same mistakes, or can she crack Santos early and change the momentum of the fight? I just think with the layoff and all the stuff going on outside of this, I don't think Agapova has improved much with this 2-year layoff. And Luana, she's been putting the work in at the UFC PI. If, you know, just consistent work. She's moved over to Vegas from Brazil. She's definitely dedicating a lot more time to getting better than Agapova is. And if Luana can get this fight to the ground, it's going to be a long night for Agapova. Luana should get this one done. I'm picking Luana by late finish or decision in this fight. I think she can tire out Agapova at elevation and eventually lock in a submission or TKO finish, man. Next up, we got Jasmine Jasudavicius taking on Fatima Kline. This is a great fight, man. I've been talking about Fatima Kline since my prospects to watch video back 5 months ago, I believe. You know, Kline stepping up on short notice and up a weight class. She was due to fight on Contender in August. So, you know, she has been in camp. But if you are, you know, like I said, if you're a longtime follower of this channel, I've been talking about Fatima Kline for a while now. She's a savage on the ground. She's got a lot of crafty submission wins in grappling tournaments. You know, like she's got 2 heel hooks, a leg lock, a knee bar. And I know you can have success in these grappling tournaments, but sometimes it doesn't transition well into MMA. But she's gotten her wins by using that ground game advantage. I wouldn't, you know, 1 submission finish, but she's taking down all of her opponents. She's got ground and pound finishes as well. The point I'm really trying to make here is I don't think Jasmine can just lay on Kline for several minutes and rack up control time. I think she's in for a much harder fight here. And Jasmine likes to use her size and wrestling to control the fight. We saw her put on a clinic on Priscilla Cachoeira, but that girl is just not serious about fighting. You know, she missed weight and there was a lot of stuff going into that fight about, you know, I think Priscilla also was coming off a loss prior to that. Priscilla Cachoeira, not a fighter that I rate very highly. I don't rate that win very highly. And, you know, Jasmine's best win has got to be the one over Miranda Maverick, where she was able to lay and pray her way to a close decision there. But I think Kline is going to give her a much harder time with that. I just think, you know, she's game on the ground. She trains with Erin Blanchfield, another girl who likes to lay and pray. So I'm sure she's been in these positions before. She's going to be the quicker striker of the two. And I think I'm going to take a shot here and pick Fatima Kline. I like her striking. She's got the tools to give Jasmine problems on the ground. I think she's gonna surprise some people with her performance, man. You know, this could be a very bad pick considering the massive step up in competition and only being 6-0. But the style of Jasmine has proven to not be very effective against good grapplers. So I'm taking a chance here on the prospect. I'm picking Fatima Kline by submission or decision in this fight. Next up, we got Joshua Van taking on Charles Johnson. This should be a good scrap. 2 guys who, you know, they take a bit to get into rhythm, but when they are in rhythm, they're dangerous. Van is coming off a knockout finish over Felipe Bunez, and it was a classic Josh Van performance from what we have seen so far. You know, he dropped the first round and came back like a savage in the second round, was able to get a finish in that second round. First finish in the UFC. He's clearly proving to be more of a threat each time he goes out there, and he's applying more tools to his game, adding more to the fight IQ. He's only 22 years old, already 3-0 in the UFC. Overall, he's on an 8-fight win streak, and it hasn't been the easiest, but he's been able to weather the early storms of his fights and then deliver just a phenomenal performance. So it's crazy that you can honestly say the same exact thing about Charles Johnson. You know, another guy who's known for dropping the first round and then eventually pulling it off. But he's had a series of opponents who have just been trying to take him down. And, you know, Johnson, that has made him a better fighter in terms of takedown defense. But in this one, I expect it to stay standing. I think Joshua Van is going to try to keep this one standing with Johnson. If anything, I can see Johnson being the one shooting 4 takedowns. And, you know, when Johnson's fights are standing for the most part, he can have a tendency to just not do enough, or he can let his opponents dictate the pace. That's from, you know, what I've seen in the tape. That fight with Odi Osborne stood out to me. You know, if Van is the one pushing the pace, I can see him working his way to a clear decision win here. And, you know, Van, I think he does have the power advantage, but Johnson, he's got the height and reach. Van is no stranger to being the smaller opponent, but Johnson's fight IQ is going to make this a good fight in my opinion. And I can't fade Joshua Van here. I think he's got much more momentum heading into this fight, and he's had a much longer camp. You know, he's been preparing to fight since April, and now finally after 4 cancellations, he's got a fight. I'm picking Van by decision here. I think Johnson makes it fun, but Van lands the more damaging shots, and I think he gets this one done by decision. So I'm picking Joshua Van there. Next up, we got Cody Brundage taking on Abdul Razak Hassan. Low-level middleweights matched up here together. Brundage is just not a guy you can count on to deliver, man. Just the most significant strikes Brundage has ever landed in a fight is 28, and that was against Nick Maximov back in 2021, and that went the distance. All right, and he lost. So in a fight that went 3 rounds, he only threw 28 significant strikes. He just went to decision, you know, with Cedricus Damas, and only landed 3 significant strikes. Point is, man, this guy is extremely one-dimensional in his approach. He relies heavy on his wrestling, and against Bo Nickel, his last fight, a guy, Bo Nickel, who's very well known for wrestling, that's, you know, Cody Brundage just decided to wrestle with him, and sometimes you got to question the fight IQ from this guy, man. It worked out for him in some of those scrambles, but Bo Nickel was eventually able to get the win. And I'm not going to credit Brundage on a, you know, I guess second round loss to Bo Nickel. People have been crediting Brundage, saying, you know, he was able to deal with Bo Nickel well early, but Bo Nickel is only 5-0. You know, like, how much can we really give credit to Cody Brundage? He should be improving, and maybe he should have made it an even closer fight than what it was, because he got finished in the second, and the cardio looked like he was starting to go in that fight. For a guy who trains at elevation, it's just an extremely questionable fighter whenever you're talking about Cody Brundage. But then his opponent, Razak Alhasssan, man, 38 years old, who has lost 5 out of his last 7 fights by every way possible. He's lost by submission, by knockout, by decision. He just has not been able to put 2 wins together ever since he was at welterweight. He's got power, that's for certain. He's got power. All of his wins in the UFC have come by knockout. He's dangerous on the feet, but as soon as you get him down, it's just, and you drag him into the later rounds, he is not the same fighter. He's gotten taken down 8 times by Malkoun, 5 times by Buckley, 3 times by Pfeiffer, lost all 3 of those regardless of his power, and they were able to find the takedown in all of those fights, man. Now he's 38. He's taking on a guy who is guaranteed to shoot for a takedown. That's all Brundage knows. And hometown kid as well. You know, I said he trains at elevation, but for Brundage, I don't know how many favors that's going to do. I think for the first time, and who knows, you know, this might be the only time, I'm picking Brundage to get a win here. I think he can get a win in this fight, man. Hassan has shown that he doesn't have the best takedown defense, and if you drag him into the later rounds where he can, you know, just tire out, he's not the same fighter. His power fades, and now if Brundage doesn't get this fight to the ground, I see no hope for him at all. So, you know, if you're looking to bet on this fight, it's just, you know, you're just a degenerate at this point. But I mean, are you going to count on a 38-year-old with 50% takedown defense who's never won a decision in the UFC, and it's at elevation? I just have to side with Brundage here by late finish or decision. I think his wrestling game is what's going to work in this fight, and I think it gets him a win here out of these two. So I'm picking Brundage by decision. Next up, man, We got Julian Erosa taking on Christian Rodriguez C-Rod. This will be the first fight, the first guy who is actually willing to strike with C-Rod in the UFC. You know, it's a good test for C-Rod and Julian Erosa in terms of the striking, but Erosa has been knocked out in 6 out of his 7 losses in the UFC. If it wasn't for just the terrible fight IQ of Ricardo Ramos, we could have seen Erosa, you know, rack up even another knockout loss, and it would have been his 3rd in a row. He was getting clipped by Ramos early and often, and then Ramos shot for a takedown. The first one was successful. Second one got caught in a guillotine and just couldn't find a way out. But on the feet, Erosa, he was getting whooped, in my opinion. And prior to that, he got knocked out in his fight before that. I just think the chin for Erosa is definitely gone. And C-Rod, not really known for finishes, but it wouldn't be the first time that Erosa has given someone their first finish in the UFC. You know, Song Woo Choi got his first only knockout in the UFC against Julian Erosa. And Fernando Padilla got his first knockout in the UFC against Julian Erosa. But, you know, Fernando Padilla, very experienced. I wouldn't say very experienced, but very lethal striker. So I can see him racking up more knockouts in the UFC in his future. C-Rod definitely has a chance to catch that chin, and he's very well rounded. I know there's a lot of controversy behind the decision win over Bulgarian. Maybe I'm being biased because I had picked him to win, but I thought Bulgarian wasn't doing a whole lot with the takedown in round 2, and in round 3 he faded. So I thought C-Rod did win the fight despite the bad first round. It's not the first time he's had a rough first round in his fights, but as I mentioned before, man, this is the first guy who isn't going to be diving at his legs in a very long time, and I think C-Rod will get the job done. I don't like the downtrend for Erosa. You know, I thought he was well on his way to picking up his 3rd loss in a row. And if it wasn't for, like I said, that terrible IQ, man, of Ramos, it sucks to say that because Ramos, talented fighter, but fight IQ is just gone, and he would have finished Erosa, and we wouldn't even be talking about this matchup. But again, man, I have to pick C-Rod here. I cannot trust the chin of Erosa. I think he is a game opponent when it comes to the striking, and he's well-rounded overall, but I don't see him going to the ground much with C-Rod, a guy who has been going to the ground with everyone else, and he's very experienced on the ground. So I'm picking C-Rod here by finish or decision in this fight. Next up, we got Gabriel Bonfim taking on Ange Loosa. Now, I got nothing good to say about Ange Loosa, man. Bonfim, though, he showed he had some cardio issues against Dalby, and you know, the UFC is really not doing him any favors putting him in Denver, but he can either look at this as a test or to his detriment, you know, because the UFC probably wants to see if this guy, you know, has learned from his first and only loss in his career. Now, you know, a loss to Nicholas Dalby is nothing to be too upset about. I mean, we just saw him pushing the pace round for round with a guy like Rinat Fakhretdinov. Dalby is high level. He's not an easy opponent to beat. Bonfim, he was able to find the mark early and often on Dalby. He was able to take Dalby down. He was dominating the fight for the most part. It's just he tired out. He gassed out. And Dalby's pressure, man, when you gas out against Dalby, it is just a disaster. It's a nightmare. You don't want to be in there with a guy like him when you gas out. And credit to Dalby, but I wouldn't say Bonfim looked terrible. You know, he got hands, his finishes a majority of his fights by submission, even though he's got hands. This guy is very well rounded. He's only 26 years old. If he can figure out the cardio issue, he can be a serious problem for, you know, a lot of people in this weight class. And Ange Loosa, I mean, he's out here quitting during fights. He's quitting. That was one of the weakest eye pokes I've ever seen a fighter quit to in my life, in his last fight against Brian Battle. And I just thought he was well on his way to a loss, and he was seeing that, and maybe he just wanted out. I'm calling it how I see it. Obviously, he's definitely not gonna say what I'm saying, but Loosa, regardless of how he looked in his last fight, he doesn't push the pace in his fights. You know, he let Munir Lazzez almost double him in significant strikes. Jack Della was able to outstrike him 108-64 in significant strikes. He hasn't finished anyone since the regional scene. And in fight promotions that I rate highly, like, you know, the LFA, he's lost. On Contender, he's lost. I'm honestly questioning if this guy even belongs in the UFC. You know, he might be a really good gym rat, but I think Bonfim is going to get this one done. I don't think it's going to take 3 rounds, but if there's one thing I can give credit to Ange Loosa for, is he can take an ass whooping for 15 minutes. We saw that against Jack Della Maddalena, and we saw that against Munir Lazzez. Bonfim, you know, he should be able to get his grappling going. He does a great job of mixing in dangerous shots before going to his grappling, and I think this is a bounce back opportunity for Bonfim. I'm picking Bonfim here by finish in this fight, man. All right, next up, we got John Silva taking on Drew Dober. John Silva, former Dog of the Week for UFC 303, is stepping in on just 2 weeks' notice to take on an even better competitor in Drew Dober. Props to John Silva for taking this fight. You know, he recognizes this is an opportunity for him to show he's more than ready for these type of opponents. He's gotten it done with his hands against Jourdain, that knockout power. He showed good get-ups after Jourdain was able to get him down. He's relentless. And you know, these are all the attributes that have given Drew Dober some problems in the past. But I think this fight is going to stay standing, and Drew Dober, he's no slouch. Most knockouts in the lightweight division. In his last one against Moicano, you know, Moicano really didn't want anything to do with the stand-up of Drew Dober. He was able to lay on him, but that's, you know, another true and experienced lightweight in Renato Moicano. Now he's got an opportunity to fight someone who's willing to stand. And Dober is, you know, he's the hometown kid, trains in Denver, and has been preparing for this fight at Elevation. Whereas Silva, you know, he just fought 2 weeks ago. He's gonna have to cut weight again. He's fighting at Elevation. I just think there's a lot weighing against Silva in this fight. He's gonna have a lot of success at featherweight, and with a full camp, I think he's gonna be a serious problem. But in this fight, I'm gonna have to pick against John Silva. Dober, you know, he has been chinned before, you know, against Matt Frivola, but he's usually durable. He's been in there with high caliber opponents. I think he gets this one done by knockout or decision. I can see the Elevation playing against Silva, but he hasn't shown a cardio weakness. I just think, you know, on 2 weeks notice and all the power he delivers into his shots, it can definitely show in this fight up in Denver. So Dober by finish or decision is going to be the pick. You know, we could see Silva go out on his shield and be a kill or be killed fighter, and Dober can rack up another finish, or Dober can get a decision win here just by making the better decisions on the feet than John Silva. So give me Drew Dober, man. Next up, we got the co-main event that not many have been asking for. Santiago Ponzinibbio taking on Muslim Salikhov. Two veterans, that are really starting to look like shells of their former self. But I think this fight has the potential to deliver. You know, I picked Randy Brown against Salikhov. I felt the age difference was going to lead to a speed difference, and Randy was able to demonstrate that with a first round finish. What I didn't like is how much faith Salikhov has in this spinning back kick, man. And at this point, all of his opponents are preparing for it. They know it's coming. And, you know, he mixes it up to the body. He mixes it up to the head. But it really hasn't been landing. And he's got good hands. I think he's got a lot of tools in the striking. But over 100 kickboxing matches prior to the UFC, and it shows for sure that he favors the kicking game. And, you know, that background is going to do him some favors in this matchup in terms of, you know, reading the calf kicks that Ponzinibbio throws well and often. And in this one, you know, only a 3-year age difference, so you can't really say who's going to have the speed advantage. But I think Ponzinibbio will be the one, you know, trying to push the pace in this fight. Where I think Ponzinibbio has advantages is the pressure he puts on his opponents. Looking at the stats, you know, more often than not, he's not getting outstruck even in his losses. In the split decision loss to Jafniel, he landed more significant strikes, but it was the damage from Jafniel that was the game changer in that fight. He's gone to decision with tough opponents, and he's never out of it. You won't see him shoot for takedowns. You won't really see him shoot for many takedowns unless he's hurt. He's got kind of a kill or be killed style, and it cost him in his last one against Kevin Holland. But he was at a massive reach disadvantage, and in the win against Morono, he was getting whooped by Morono, and every round, and Morono took it on short notice. He was well on his way to a loss against Morono, and Santiago, he just caught that chin in the 3rd round. Morono got overconfident in his striking. That fight stood out to me the most because it really showed that, you know, Ponzinibbio is definitely starting to slow down. He's far from the prime years that we saw Ponzinibbio put on. I think it was a five fight winning streak. He had a finish over Neil Magny. I mean, this guy, he used to be like someone you can mention into the top 15 about welterweights. But at this stage in his career, man, I could really see a scenario where Santiago, you know, he isn't looking good early against Salikhov, but then eventually pulling out the win. And you know, 40 years old, starting to slow down. I think Salikhov, man, I just think Ponzinibbio is going to dictate the pace of this fight, and he should force Salikhov on the back foot, where Salikhov doesn't really fight at his best on the back foot. So I'm picking Ponzinibbio by finish or decision. Very low confidence. You know, these are two veterans throwing down. So, you know, I'm picking Ponzinibbio here by finish or decision in this fight. So next up, we got the main event. Rose Namajunas taking on Tracy Cortez. I think I have to flat out say this. I think Rose is the better fighter. You know, you got to add that she's had much more time to prepare for Denver and 5 rounds. Tracy is game though. I think, you know, what I saw in that Jasudavicius fight in terms of striking, she was definitely putting the work in on her striking. She's got the wrestling. We know that's her ace. But there's just so many questions going into this fight for Tracy Cortez. You know, it's her first 5-round fight. It's at elevation. You know, did the striking really only look good because it was against Jasudavicius? You know, and you know, we really don't know. This is a big step up to go from Miranda Maverick in a 3-rounder to a 5-rounder with a former champ in Rose Namajunas with a lot of experience. You know, Rose has faced all the who's who, and since this move up in weight class, you know, the momentum kind of slowed down for her when she lost against Firo. but she worked her way back to the win column with, you know, not so entertaining performance against Amanda Ribas, another girl who has been capable of moving up and down weight classes. So there's also some questions for Rose going into this fight. You know, can she grapple with a true strawweight? You know, I have to question that because against Fiorot, she went 0 for 6 on takedown attempts, and she's really yet to get a takedown against a true strawweight. Ribas, like I said, she moves up and down weight classes, and in her last 2 fights overall, she's had moments where she's just not doing enough. And you know, Rose, she makes great reads on the feet. She's very tough to submit and take down. Carla Esparza, the one-dimensional wrestler, she went 2 for 11 on takedown attempts against Rose Namajunas. Tracy is very well known for her wrestling ability. She's had a lot of her success by being able to out wrestle all of her opponents, and in the striking, you know, she definitely has improved, but I don't think it's on the level of Rose just yet. And you know, she hasn't shown much finishing ability. All of her wins have come by decision, and for that reason, I think this is going to go into the later rounds, and that's just where Rose can take advantage of this fight. For the pick, I gotta go Rose Namajunas here. So much experience with 5 rounds. She makes the right reads on the feet against much more dangerous competition. I think her cage time is adding up, but it's going to do her some favors in this matchup. And I'm picking Rose to get this one done by decision. And there you guys have it, man. Those are the picks and predictions for this card. We got some close matchups, and you know, these odds are starting to get a little wild, but I'm gonna be doing a breakdown with Pick'em on Thursday night. I hope you guys tune in. We're gonna be breaking down some bets and you know, who we feel more confident in terms of this card. It's tough, man. So hope you guys like it. Comment, subscribe, let me know what you guys think of these picks in the comments, man. I'm out of here. Peace.